Hi, it's Winton Churchill with the Barefoot Consultants, and welcome to our Facebook Friday call today. Today, we're going to be talking about that one thing you can change as you look forward into the future that might cause you to have an amazing next decade. Many baby boomers today are caught up in the question mark of, do I go back into an office, or do I stay at home and work remotely with my current employer if they offer that option? Or do I go ahead and go out on my own and go freelancing? And for 50 plus people, this is a really interesting decision. Many of us worked through our career, followed it to the end, got the gold watch and that kind of thing. But others of us set out on our own. That was kind of my path about 20 years ago when I went out as an independent freelancer. And looking back and looking at some of what some of my friends have done that stayed, and have a perspective on what the pros and cons of those things are. So have lots of data there around that. But then we have the pandemic, and of course that changes everything. And the decision to go back into the office is not just do I want to do that commute again? It's also has to do with the health situation. Do you want to be in an office potentially where people might be coming in with something you could catch and that kind of thing? And who knows if the central air and heating system is good enough to suppress the kind of things that you might be susceptible to and that kind of thing. So talking to a lot of people of late who are thinking about, should I stay? Should I go? What are the pros and cons of that sort of thing? And one conversation I had is somebody who's just considering going back into the office. They have just a few years left before they retire. They would like to retire with the company that they're with. So there's a lot of reasons compelling them to stay with the company. But on the other hand, they're over the last year and a half, they've grown very comfortable with working from home and not having to show up at work, and been very pleased with the amount of work that they've been able to get done. They feel like it's much more work than they would have been able to do if they were sitting in the office. And they've sort of adopted the remote worker lifestyle, but they haven't really they're not quite ready to go freelance. They want to hang around and get the benefits that they've accrued in this company for a period of time. So lots of reasons to stay in positions, lots of reasons to not make that move. Lots of people now that want to continue as an employee are negotiating with their employer to get some number of days per week that they can work outside of the office. And many more folks are receptive to this. Hi, Tom. Good to see you. Welcome in here. So they're considering their choices. They're considering what makes the most sense for their family. But if you're, approaching that retirement age of 65, and I know that now the stats show that a lot of people are working beyond 65, and that's a good thing. It's great that opportunity is out there, and people are able to do that. But the issue is, do you lose quite a bit of freedom and flexibility? The number one thing that comes back from freelancers that they like about making the move to freelancing is they like the flexibility of their own schedule. This is time and time again the number one thing that keeps coming up. And so that would be something to really consider. Does the flexible schedule that you have when you're working from home, does that pay off for you? Is that a big enough benefit? In one recent case, I saw that people were able to take between 20 and 30% less salary if they could continue working for the company but not have to go back into the office. So that's kind of an interesting proposition. This is one of the options that you could negotiate if in fact you are like everybody has, most everybody has been working from home. It seems like a fairly reasonable thing to do. You know, you've demonstrated for a year and a half your ability to do it. Your manager and department manager or whoever might be overseeing the organization that you're in has a perspective of how much you've been able to produce working from home. You know, there's many people that couldn't handle the working from home. They kind of dropped their schedule. You know, they didn't get things done on cut time. They were distracted by television, family events going on, all kinds of stuff. And it's not for everybody. But if it did work for you and you were able to uh, work effectively, and you know that your boss recognized that, you might be able to negotiate something like that. There's Bob coming in from Roatan. Good to see you, Bob. Uh, Bob's does a lot of stuff underwater, some beautiful photography there. And you ought to go over and take a look at his Facebook page to see some of those amazing photographs that he takes every week. So uh, excellent. So yeah. What's your choice? I'd be interested to hear what you're thinking. Do you have this choice to make of stay as an employee versus become a freelancer, or the choice of uh, continue to work for your company but doing it remotely, you know, as an option? Lots of people that's up for them right now. I just ran across a couple articles today. One of the things that they're calling this is the Great Resignation, and I'm going to share the screen here on a couple of pages. These articles are kind of interesting to take a look at. Let me just bump us up to the here we go. There, we're sharing the page. The Great Resignation is here. People are quitting their jobs at higher than usual rate. What can business do to keep their workers? You know, and so a lot of workers or a lot of companies are trying to figure out how all this comes together and how do we protect that. And there's this Anthony Klotz, who's from Texas A&M University, that first coined this term, the Great Resignation. And as you can see, April, May, and June saw 11 million workers quit their job. Imagine that. I mean, that is huge. That's not small potatoes, you know. And as they point out in this article, the alarming figures. You know, how do we keep our teams together and make the progress that we want to make when we're dealing with you know, this kind of situation? This is pretty let's see if I can get that a little bit bigger. Things make it, there we go. Just make it very difficult to you know, sort of coming out of what we're coming out of, how to put your teams back together, how to build that momentum that you had before everything sort of wound down. And let's see, here's another interesting statistics. According to a survey conducted by LinkedIn, 74% of those indicated that they spent time at home, even either during the shutdown or working remotely, and it's caused them to rethink their work situation. You know, for many years, you know, particularly having been a freelancer for the better part of 20 years, going on 21 years now, and teaching people how to do this starting about 14 years ago, I have just seen people make this transition and be delighted. It's not surprising to me that 74% of folks are thinking about it. Hey, if I could get out of here, would I do it? You know, and then lots of questions come up like, hey, what do I do for health insurance? And, you know, what do I do for uneven cash flows? And how do I build my clientele? There's lots of good answers for those when you start looking at those. So it's just a matter of looking at those, but still lots of concern, and that's a huge number. And there were attitudes among many managers in both businesses and nonprofit organizations. They would say, hey, how do I, uh, how do I shore up my workforce? How do I uh, tap the talent pools? And freelancing became a very good solution to that. But so many companies ignored the idea of hiring freelancers because it just sounded too complex to them. They were worried about their proprietary information getting out. They were worried about all kinds of things, most of which didn't materialize. And the others, there were good answers for. There were good systems. We have things like the cloud that didn't really exist in its current form 10 years ago. Now it's very secure. Uh, Now it's very something that's very much can be relied on as a source of effective private communication and sharing of documents and that kind of thing. Of course, there's always the occasional article about how somebody gets breached or something like that. But by and large, these systems are very reliable. Lots of work gets done, lots of things happen. And there were so many managers and organizations that were just absolutely opposed to freelancing or even letting people work from home. And now, given what we've been through for the last year and a half, many millions more managers have to confront the reality that yes, people can work effectively at home. And in fact, many of the surveys that were done of managers and CEOs of small business, there were several different surveys that were done, mentioned that, hey, people would put in more hours when they didn't have to commute. They didn't have to, fight traffic. They didn't have to get up and get dressed every day and, have all the inconveniences of going to work, that they wound up basically giving that time or a portion of it, in many cases, 2 to 3 hours a day, back to their employer in terms of increased work. And many CEOs cited increased productivity as people work from home. And that's kind of interesting when you think about people working from home and not really being set up. The pandemic kind of came on us in a hurry. It popped up there. I know that for me, I was on a business trip from Mexico and was passing through Dallas, and they said, "Hey, we're locking down tomorrow. You got to get someplace and figure all that out." And so lots of figuring to do, lots of where do I set up a base so that I can continue to work with our members and continue to do the video trainings that we do and all that kind of stuff. So very complicated initially, and it took a month, 2 months, 3 months to really get everything dialed in, because you couldn't just go out and buy the tools you needed, buy the computer you needed, buy the lights you needed, whatever it might be. And so you had to order from Amazon. You had to sort of have Amazon and UPS and the postal service bring all that stuff to you, and very difficult times getting started here as we come to the end of the pandemic, fingers crossed, where we know a lot better how to piece all these things together, and we don't have to make the changes under quite as adverse a condition. So very important to to know that lots of new tools have been created for people working remotely, lots of new processes, lots of new applications that address workflow. So when you work on something and do the work that you're supposed to do on that, and the document needs to be passed to somebody else, that all that is sort of tracked. We've seen some really great headways in those kind of systems, just kind of on an emergency basis. And now we're starting to see systems come out that are really much more sophisticated. The pandemic really put a real emphasis on the sophistication of these workflow systems, which are going to revolutionize the idea of working at home, make it so much easier. Because now, if you're not using one of those systems, documents get lost. To this day, the number one complaint I hear of people working from home is, it's accessing stuff. There's something that they need access to. They don't know how to find it. They don't have access to the cloud to it, that kind of thing. But all those things are being ironed out. People are figuring that stuff out. And there's going to be a lot less friction in this whole process of working online. So we're getting ready to sail into some really amazing times, and the organizations, many organizations kind of approach this whole idea of working remotely and freelancing from a sort of an authoritarian, somewhat dictatorial point of view. And when you have millions of people leaving the workforce, you kind of have to do a reset as a manager. Your resource base is changing. They just are not willing to come in and work like they once were. They're not willing to put up with a commute. They're not willing to not have the flexibility to be able to, at 3:15 in the afternoon to go get their kids from school. It's just something they've gotten used to and something they want to continue to do. And so one of the things that has happened is that as people consider freelancing, especially among the age group 50 and above, they're concerned that it's too difficult for them, that it's too technical for them. And what they usually don't realize is that maybe 30 to 40% of all the jobs out there that they could do online are not technical. They don't require the technical expertise that they think it does. In fact, one of the things that I hear most frequently from members of our programs that go into the freelance economy and figure out how to do it through our programs, they say, I was making this harder than it really is. And what I know from doing this for 15 years is that what's happening is that the work that's being done online is very much like the work that you have done in your career. If you're age 50 or over, you have lots of experience doing things. Organizations are still doing those exact same things. They might be doing them in a different way. Instead of a piece of paper, it might be an electronic document. Instead of a correspondence going through the mail, it might be going through email and that kind of thing. But these are adjustments that you've already made. And most baby boomers don't understand that they've already made many of the adjustments they have to make to work in the virtual world. And now some of the other tiny adjustments are learning to work, how to work in these job and project networks. And job and project networks have been the real enabler of a steady flow of work for many new freelancers. And this is a concept to figure out, because finding out where the business and in fact where the money comes from when you're making the transition to freelancer is always rough. And there's a couple approaches to freelancing. There's one is you print up some business cards and you start calling everybody you know and say, hey, I'm freelancing now, and seeing if something pops up. And frankly, that's a very inefficient way to freelance. But if you go on to a job and project network and you log in today and to a system like Upwork, and you see 8,000 jobs that are proofreading jobs, any one of which you could bid on today and win and start doing. That's all the jobs are organized. They're teed up. The buyer knows exactly what they want. They're ready to spend money now. And so much of freelancing in the past has been this frustrating, friend of mine calls it kabuki dance, where, here's what I can do. Maybe you need this. I don't know if I need it. Maybe I don't need quite that much of it. How much does it cost? Oh, that's too much. These systems just streamline all that stuff. In fact, they don't streamline is an exaggeration. They just remove big hunks of the process from your step by step to getting to your best client. And so this is an important concept to understand. Is it's not printing up business cards and going to Chamber of Commerce meetings. It's logging in, finding proofreading jobs, and then narrowing that down to your what we call your domain or domains of knowledge. If you, depending on your occupation, a whole lot about uh I was talking to a podiatrist recently, knows a whole lot about the foot, obviously, but knows a lot about exercising and training after an injury and sports and that kind of thing. So in his case, proofreading on topics related to foot injuries, uh, articles relating to running and training, and how fast you increase your training rate, and after you have an injury, how long do you have to wait. He had many different things that were very interesting to impart to the organizations that are online that are looking for people to write articles and do proofreading and all the other things that they do. So it's a matter of thinking about your skill set in a different way, thinking about your knowledge in a different way, and not really doing things much differently than most of us do those at work. If you're still working for an employer, you're pretty up to speed on working in the virtual world. I mean, most employers today have mastered that virtual world thing. So you're, I don't know, 60-70% of the way there. And if you're going to be a freelancer, it's a matter of making that last 20% of the trip to figure out how to use these job and project networks. That's the important thing. And a lot of people see that as a a big difficult thing to master, and there are things to do there. It is a different way of working, but it's very similar, lots of analogs in the real world, so it's not too hard to make the leap of what it is you're going to be doing. So very important to know that and kind of scratch the surface and look at it and say, this whole thing is uh, maybe it's not as difficult as I thought. When you get down to the specifics of what you have to do and what's going to be different, there's a lot of good training, a lot of good ways to come up to speed on that. And particularly as somebody who's 50 plus, you have something that is in great demand right now, is you have typically 30 years or more of solving problems in different jobs, in different life situations. And problem solving ability is probably the number one thing that freelance buyers turn to somebody to do. And as a competitor in this area, the freelance economy, when you've got 10, 20, 30 years experience doing uh, different things that are in demand, you're head and shoulders above many of the people who have not had that same experience. And one of the things that we teach baby boomers to do is to emphasize that experience in a way that doesn't make them sound old, but helps them to sound powerful, resourceful, and incontrovertibly support the fact that they've got tons and tons of experience. If you look at where we are now, and I'm talking to people all day long, I mean, it's crazy times. Nobody has ever seen anything as crazy as what we're going through right now. And having experienced in the past, understanding that this is not your first rodeo. You lived through the fuel crisis in the early 70s. You have lived through various financial up and downs along the way. You've lived through the dot-com bomb. You've lived through 9/11, fuel shortages, all kinds of things, and come back from that. And a lot of the skills that you learned in that are the skills that are needed right now. So that's a very important concept to embrace as you consider this idea of having the freedom to freelance for where you are. There has never been more opportunity for freelancers. And what I'm seeing is companies are making adjustments, and organizations and even government agencies, where they can take more liberal use of freelancers than they ever could before. It's something that was kind of a hell no in many organizations, and now it's absolutely, we as we come up with our staffing plan, we have to rely on freelancers. We're not going to be able to fulfill all our needs with employees, and in many cases, we don't have uh, the money to bring in the employees. I was talking to a freelance buyer recently that said, I have the money to bring back a full-time employee in this position, but right now it makes sense for me to bring back two freelancers with different skills, related skills, but different skills at 20 hours a week because we don't have the volume of work right now. And I get somebody at the peak of this one skill set and somebody at the peak of this other skill set, and I can bring them together on a job. And that helps me manage our head count. It helps us build momentum. It helps us not spend excessively. It helps us produce a profit by using freelancers that way. And of course, that creates tremendous new opportunities for freelancers. So lots of good things happening. Would be interested if you have any insights or people yourself or somebody in your circle of family or friends that is facing this consideration right now. Do I go back? Do I stay? Be interested to hear what people are deciding to do. So just pop that in the chat room. I do want to welcome all our people listening virtually to this. We get about 90 to 95% of the people that hear this are not participating live. They're listening to the replay. And we want to let you know that we continue to answer questions in the chat window. So if you have questions about this process or comments about situations you may be facing and that kind of thing, happy to answer that in the chat. And oftentimes we provide some resources and links to things that might be helpful to you. So happy to do that. So with that, we'll bring this Facebook Friday to a close. We look forward to seeing you next week. We'll see our members next Tuesday night on our Tuesday night freelance call. And have a great weekend. Take care.